Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM for Tuesday, November 18th. I'm Andrew Walworth, and joining me are RCP President and co-founder Tom Bevan and Washington Bureau Chief Carl Cannon. So, guys, Miranda Devine has a piece in the New York Post. It's on the front page of RCP this morning. You can find it at RealClearPolitics.com. And it's about Thomas Crooks, the would-be assassin who fired 8 shots at President Trump last summer in Butler, Pennsylvania. And she writes this: there is something very wrong with the official story, and that invites conspiracy theories. A man was murdered. What is going on? So, Tom, what is going on? And I guess the question really is, what did the FBI know about Thomas Crooks, and when did they know it?
That is the question. And you know, Tucker Carlson released a video, sort of a documentary investigation on this a few days ago. Miranda Devine followed up with a column. It looks like they might have had the same source that clued them in as to the FBI saying essentially that Thomas Crooks initially saying that he had no online presence whatsoever, and then coming back and saying, well, we found some online account that we think, you know, is his, and it had a bunch of anti-immigrant and anti-Semitic remarks on it, basically branding him a right-winger. And as Tucker and Miranda both point out, there was a period where he was sort of used very hot rhetoric, and basically his comments, he had over 730 comments on YouTube. And, you know, he was espousing political violence against Democrats, against the squad. This was all in 2019, but seems to have shifted in 2020 and beyond, when right around the period of COVID, and started calling Donald Trump stupid, making fun of the deep state, making fun of Trumpers, calling them a cult, etc. And so there's a whole other side to this story that we weren't really told about. And then he kind of disappeared offline. And there are other questions that have been asked about this, you know, investigation, and why there wasn't more transparency, why we don't have more information about it, and some different aspects of the investigation. Now, Susan Crabtree, who's one of our national political reporters, has covered Butler extensively. She's covered the Secret Service beat for over a decade, and her sources and her reporting was basically that Butler was, I would say, the perfect storm of incompetence and miscommunication, or lack of communication, between the Secret Service and the local police. And you had people in the Secret Service that were doing their jobs for the first time, and it was just a complete mess. But it wasn't this sort of grand conspiracy. So I'd be interested to hear what Susan has to say about these revelations and the questions that remain outstanding of why we don't have more information about Thomas Crooks. And again, and this is something that, you know, members of Congress, Trump himself, have requested from his own administration, and we still don't have the answers. It's
I guess
very odd.
Yeah, I mean, that's part of the thing that makes this interesting, or at least, is that both Christopher Wray and the current FBI director are both sort of singing from the same book on this, at least so far, Carl. How big a problem is this for the FBI?
Well, it's I don't know how big a problem it is for the FBI, because I don't know how far the president is willing to push it. But Tucker Carlson certainly threw down the gauntlet. His I think it's about 35-minute documentary. It opens with Paul Abate, the deputy director of the FBI, giving the testimony before Congress that Tom referenced, in which he said, yeah, he said, yeah, and he was very vague. He said, you know, if this is the footprint, we found one thing, and these anti-Semitic and anti-immigrant things. And Tucker Carlson said flatly, that was a lie. The FBI lied to you. By then there was all this other stuff. He had 700 comments on YouTube, all under his own name. He had, 15 other accounts. So they implied that he was a bit of a ghost on social media. He was very, very active from the time he was 14 or 15 on social media, with increasingly violent, luridly violent and graphic threats against public officials. First, the squad, Democrats in general, liberals. Then he during the pandemic, according to this source that Tucker Carlson used and accessed these social media posts, he switched during COVID. And it started when he people who didn't want to be quarantined, and he called them stupid. And then he turned against Trump. Then there's according in a Tucker Carlson video, there's this mysterious foreign actor who starts engaging with him. I think his name is it Willie Tepes? Is that the name?
Willie
Tom?
Tepes, yeah.
I was noodling around on that, Tom. I don't know if you knew this. My mother was Romanian, so I happen to know that Vlad Tepes is in Romanian the name for Vlad the Impaler, Dracula. And if this was a Norwegian account, which it appears to be Vili, Vlad, it seems it's obviously it's not a real name, is what I'm saying, but it's some foreign account. So somebody he was engaged with somebody. So the conspiracy minded people immediately go, okay, he was corrupted. He was Thomas Crooks. He was obviously a very mentally ill young man, and he was recruited and switched. That's and there's a deep state cover up. My experience in Washington has taught me, and Susan and I talked about this, Tom, while I was editing those stories last year. She won a very prestigious prize for her coverage of the Secret Service, and we and Susan and I would always go back and forth. Gee, this looks bad. Yeah, is it a conspiracy or is it incompetence? And I interested, Andy. You've covered Washington a long time too. Almost always, it seems to me, it's incompetence in Washington, but not always. There are conspiracies, but in this case, the FBI, you had Christopher Wray, who in his testimony kind of poo-pooed the idea that Trump was even shot. Remember that, Tom?
Yep.
Yeah, and then the Paul Abate sort of either they didn't find any of this material or just being evasive. I wouldn't say he lied, but maybe lying by omission, you could say. But then what's to explain it with Kash Patel and Don Bongino? And they've been asked about this in Tucker Carlson's video twice. Kash Patel says, "We'll have to wait till after the trial's over." Well, there's no trial of Thomas Cook. So there's a trial for the other assassin of Trump. And Don Bongino says, "Well, if there was a there, do you think I would, I'm friends with Trump. That's why I got the job." But it's bizarre because Senator Ron Johnson has specifically asked for videos, all the emails, anything the FBI found on Thomas Crooks. And we've never seen it in the public, and Congress never got it. But now we can, but if you log on to Tucker's channel, you can see it on social media. Tucker Carlson has a picture, a video of Thomas Crooks firing a pistol, a target practice, apparently in his own bedroom in Pennsylvania, and along with all these vile messages.
His parents' house, right.
His parents' house. And the question is, I'm not saying there was a conspiracy of the deep state to kill Trump. I'm not saying that. That strikes me as unlikely. You'd have hundreds of people involved in it. But what are they hiding? This is the question that comes up. It's not different from the Jeffrey Epstein files. When people are stonewalling, it's just human nature to wonder, what are they hiding? What don't they want us to know?
Yeah. Well, and I'm sorry, Andy, I was just going to say, Patel and Bongino said that they were, they got all the briefings on this. And the question is, well, were they misled by people below them about some of the details? And even if, and Miranda Devine references in her column that Susan Crabtree is reporting that the Secret Service said that Thomas Crooks was not known to them prior to 2020. And so was it 2020 or was it 2024?
24. Yeah, they didn't know until 2024.
They didn't know.
Right.
And the question is, okay, even if you say it was total incompetence that led to this, after the fact, why was the investigation? I mean, the FBI has all the resources in the world. They could do an investigation of you or I right now, and it'd probably take about 24 hours for them to dig up basically everything that we've ever done online for the past 20 years. I mean, this is not like, and it takes some anonymous source 4 years after the fact to tip off Tucker Carlson and Miranda Devine. I mean, it strikes me as implausible that the FBI was either incurious. I mean, did they not think that this was worth investigating? I don't understand why we don't have more information. And obviously, when you have a situation where these questions arise, if you don't have full transparency and people don't feel like they're getting the full truth from the government, well, that creates a vacuum, and you know what vacuums get filled with.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Kash Patel, this is only one problem the FBI director has. He's really been plagued by these reports of bad behavior. The Wall Street Journal put it this way: in his 9 months on the job, Patel has drawn flack from his bosses in the Justice Department and from his underlings at the FBI Bureau of Investigation, at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Carl, he's been accused of misusing the FBI's jet, and the latest is that he's provided this FBI security detail for his girlfriend, who's a country singer named Alexis Wilkins. How much trouble is Kash Patel in these days?
Well, this latest revelation, it's a little bit piling on. I mean, if she's being threatened because she's dating him, it behooves the government to protect her. I don't I don't I don't want to use that thing as the hook here, but Kash Patel he was uncertain in his response to the kind of bumbling in his response to the Charlie Kirk killing. He said some things that weren't true. He hasn't impressed anybody in the bureau. He hasn't responded to this thing we've been talking about on the assassination in any way that gives you confidence. And you just wonder, with all these people, Donald Trump picked a cabinet in his second term. He learned a lesson from his first term. And what he was going to value above all on was loyalty. Loyalty to him, loyalty to the MAGA movement, loyalty to his family. He didn't want people out there freelancing. But Kash Patel and some of the missteps of Pam Bondi makes you wonder, is that really the only criterion? I understand it's a prerequisite, but is there nothing you can do that, Trump won't ease you out? Having said that, FBI directors were never considered really part of the cabinet. These were long-term appointments. It was supposed to be nonpartisan. Presidents have always wanted to fire these guys when they did something that embarrassed them. And for the most part, they've resisted. And, Trump certainly gotten, stirred a hornet's nest when he eased James Comey out in his first term, although Comey had done enough that, Democrats on the Capitol and Republicans wanted him gone. We forget that now because he's written all these books and become a media darling. But and found those seashells.
Yeah.
But this is not supposed. It's not supposed to be a political job. And so in terms of replacing him, my guess would be that Trump would be a little chary about it. It backfired the first time.
Yeah.
And he knew what he was getting, I think, better than the rest of us when he appointed Kash Patel.
Tom, do you see it that way? Because he's used this FBI plane to fly to, to go hunting during the government shutdown. It's the kind of small ball stuff that upsets people. And this thing with his girlfriend giving her a security detail when they've removed security detail from people like John Bolton. A lot of this must be coming from inside the FBI, it seems to me.
Well, that's
right?
The thing, right? Is that, because they mentioned in the article that the FBI director is required to take the government plane because he needs secure communications at all times, but he's supposed to reimburse for the, cost of a commercial flight or whatever. But, I think where Kash Patel, when he was not in government, criticized the former FBI director for taking the jet and saying, oh, he's using it for vacation. So he looks like a hypocrite, right? That's the thing. And what's most telling is the fact, and the White House and Kash Patel dismissed this Wall Street Journal piece as a hit piece, and there's probably something to that. But what's really relevant is that people within the organization were willing to dish on him, to make him look bad publicly. He does have enemies within his organization, and there is discontent with the way that he's been running things. And some of this stuff, he was at dinner in New York City at Rouse, apparently this, pricey Italian restaurant,
right,
like the day after Charlie Kirk was assassinated, instead of being out in Utah working the case. And then he flew out there, and as you mentioned, he didn't handle it well initially. He said some, sort of bizarre and incorrect things. So he has had these stumbles and gaffes that have not made him look like he's the, totally on the ball. And now, does that mean Trump has lost faith in him? I don't know. I don't think so necessarily. I mean, Trump's stuck with, Pete Hegseth and his other cabinet members who've taken a lot of heat, probably even more heat than Kash Patel. And so I don't know that he's in any danger of losing his job, but he does continue to fight a PR battle that is being waged at some level within the FBI itself. And that's
Andy, who's the first one to go in the Trump administration? Who's the first one he eases out?
That's a good question because, I think the betting was Pete Hegseth early on, but he seems to have weathered the storm. And then Pam Bondi had her moment. She weathered. And it does seem to me that...
Mike Waltz got whacked at NSA, right?
Yeah, he got whacked at NSA, but he moved to the UN.
They gave him
we're going to
UN.
talk about him in a second because he's having a pretty good day today, at least. We'll talk about more about that. But I don't know. I would be hard-pressed to decide who suffers the wrath of Trump. But it is kind of interesting that how long everyone has been sticking around. He has not been sort of playing musical chairs other than...
I mean, at this point in his first administration,
right?
he'd fired like 5 people by tweet.
Yeah.
Already.
Right. Yeah. How many chiefs of staff had he gone through by now? So,
I think he got rid of the Secretary of State, like on Twitter, right?
Right. Yeah. All right. Well,
Poor-
guys, unless you guys want to weigh in, that was Carl was trying to get me to commit myself here. But if you guys have a vote on who do you think is the first cabinet member to get the boot? Anybody gonna?
Well, I've already been wrong. I thought Hegseth would be gone by now, so I have no credibility.
Tom, do you want to weigh in? You want to be like me?
I don't. I mean, they all seem secure in their jobs. They've all, Kristi Noem has had her issues, Pete Hegseth, RFK, but they all seem to have weathered the storm. So I don't know. If you're listening, if you're watching on YouTube, throw us a comment and tell us who you think.
Yeah, that's
gonna
true.
Be the first,
we can poll our viewers who they
right.
think is the first to go.
That's right.
Or maybe everyone sticks around for 4 wonderful years. Anyway, you're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom Bevan and Carl Cannon, and we'll be back with more right after these words.
Bank of America just issued a warning about forced selling in the stock market. It's not because these companies are failing. It's because the structure is broken. They say if problems continue, in the credit market, big investors like pension funds could be forced to dump stocks just to raise cash, not by any strategy, but because of panic. Here to explain what this means for your savings is Shannon Davis, CEO of American Alternative Assets. Shannon, why should this latest market warning worry Americans who are just trying to protect their retirement?
Tom, a very good question. It's because it's showing how fragile our financial system really is. One problem that is being really cornered is just the mass debt that we've got. The private credit, can trigger a major sell-off right now in our public stocks. It's about liquidity. And again, it comes back to our debt, and it's about how fast our confidence is starting to wane. When the institutions are in a pinch for cash, when they're in illiquid investments, which a lot are tied into pensions, especially with some of the things that Trump's allowed because they need more money to feed the beast, which is our stock market. When there's nothing that is liquid for them to pull out, they'll just sell whatever they can. And they'll sell in bulk. That's what we're seeing right now. And that's the warning sign that even Bank of America is telling Americans.
If you want to see what smart investors are doing to prepare, get the guide. Call 855-450-GOLD right now to get the guide. Or go to tomlovesgold.com right now. The guide is free. It explains why gold still matters, how debt, risk, and instability could affect your retirement, and what moves may make sense before the next storm hits. That's tomlovesgold.com or call 855-450-GOLD right now.
Gentlemen, President Trump is meeting at the White House today with Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. We also know him as MBS. There's an Oval Office meeting. There'll be a lunch and then a dinner. And the president already made some news by announcing something last night. Listen to this.
They've been a great ally. They've got to like us very much. Look at the Iran situation, what we did in terms of obliterating, we obliterated their nuclear capability. Yeah, I will say that we will be doing that. We'll be selling F-35s here.
So, Carl, they're selling these F-35 jet planes. And there's hope coming out of this, I guess, that Saudi Arabia will join the Abraham Accords. So what do you make of the visit, and what's at stake here?
You know what? A great ally is a interesting term. Most presidents would have been more diplomatic, but because this is the Crown Prince, according to American intelligence, and we spent the first segment talking about how our domestic intelligence services aren't all they're cracked up to be. So I understand how that might sound, but determined that the Crown Prince personally ordered the murder of Jamal Khashoggi in the embassy in Turkey. And you said yesterday, Tom, excuse me, Andy, that the French, maybe we need to take a lesson from the French, who sit down with anybody. But this was a thing that Trump spoke about in his first term, and he was horrified by it. And now, it's like it never happened. But the president did say, the reason the administration and the previous administration saw Saudi Arabia as a valuable counterweight in the region to Iran, which, exports terror and does and kills all kinds of people, including Americans. So maybe, it was the question of the lesser of two evils. But if there's going to be a lasting peace in the Middle East, which is what the president, which all of us hope, and which President Trump put forward with the agreement between Hamas, the tenuous agreement between Hamas and Israel, Saudi Arabia is going to have to play a part in it. They're also going to have to play a big part in the rebuilding of Gaza, if that takes place. So I understand why he's doing it, but he just has a way of speaking that's so different from other presidents. I remember when the first time I ever covered Saudi Arabian president, I was new in my 20s in Washington, and there was a plan to sell AWACS.
AWACS, the arms deal, yeah.
Yeah, they're
Sidewinders.
That's right. And they're, radars that go in these airplanes. And it's like the F-35 is the most advanced weapon, that we were willing to sell to Saudi Arabia. And people in Congress objected to it because Saudi Arabia was at that time an implacable foe of Israel. And Israel thought they would be threatened by these weapons. And, the vote came through, and it was a very close vote in the Senate. Reagan got what he wanted. The White House issued a statement. The president is relieved. This has been an arduous process. And Mike Deaver, in his memoir, put down what Reagan really said after the vote. He came into the room and told his staff members, he goes, "I feel like I just crapped a pineapple." So anyway, my point is, that was Reagan in private, not public.
In private, not public, right. Tom, the Israelis aren't wild about this F-35 sale. And it does remind those of us who remember when the Sidewinders were sold back in the early 80s, I think, or maybe it was the late 70s. No, it was early 80s, of course. It was Reagan.
Yeah.
To Carl's point, Saudi Arabia, now the murder happened in 2018, and he's all but admitted it. He's taken responsibility for it. He's publicly. In a sense, I guess that's water under the bridge, but it is a reminder that these places, they're capable of horrible things. And yet, to Carl's point, Saudi Arabia is a key part of any future in any direction in the Middle East. So in some sense, I guess it makes sense. And, the Crown Prince is here, and you've got to do what you can to move him forward.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it was a terrible, terrible thing. I mean, the details of it, it was so gory. He was cut up with bone saws and it was a really horrible, heinous thing that was done to Jamal Khashoggi. So no, everybody stipulates that, right? But then the broader question is, okay, well, what do we do about it? So do we just cut Saudi Arabia off and sanction them, and we make them an enemy in the Middle East? Joe Biden wasn't even willing to do that. You remember when Joe Biden traveled overseas, and there was this big question, what's he going to do? And he ended up fist bumping with MBS instead of shaking hands, which I guess he thought was somehow a compromise or gave off enough of an air that he was not willing to, formally shake his hand that would satisfy his detractors back home. I mean, look, the fact is,
or maybe just Biden's aides told him that MBS was a former, basketball player that he didn't really know.
Maybe he didn't even know who he was fist bumping. Who knows?
Right.
But the point is, look, you have to deal with in some cases bad actors around, and not the purest, folks who are leading some of these countries, and that's a reality. That's a reality. I mean, Trump just had the president of Syria was talking to him. I mean, this guy was a former, Al Qaeda.
He planted
terrorist.
IEDs himself that killed American soldiers.
So, maybe that makes Trump, he's more willing to do that than previous presidents or other presidents. He certainly has demonstrated that he's willing to talk with anyone from, Rocket Man to Putin to anybody who will have a meeting with him. But that is a reality, and all presidents have to deal with it. And if you want to advance American interests, particularly in the Middle East, as Carl mentioned, Saudi Arabia is a pretty good ally to have, and because they're going to be an integral part of reshaping that, hopefully for the better, not just of the region, but of the world.
Yeah. And Carl, if the quo here is that they're going to sign on to the Abraham Accords, that would be a real feather in the cap of the White House at this point.
Well, yeah, but I'm, since I've already awarded Trump 9 or 10 Nobel Prizes. I'm not so concerned with him getting more feathers in his cap. I am very concerned with peace in the Middle East and Israel being allowed to continue as a country in good standing in the world and live, and for Israelis to live safely. So if Saudi Arabia wants to be part of the solution, yeah, I think that, I guess, having a meeting with the Crown Prince is a small price to pay.
Well, and I think the other thing about MBS is he is I think, modernizing that society and moving it in a direction that I think represents progress for women to a certain degree. And the last thing we want is Saudi Arabia to go back to being a Wahhabist dominated country that hates America and wants to inflict harm on us and our allies around the world. And I think MBS he's not that, right? He is much more open to the West and to modernizing, and I think we need to embrace that, even though he did a terrible thing.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about the UN in this context for a second. The Security Council yesterday approved this plan, the American plan for Gaza. It was a 13-0 vote in the Security Council. Russia, China abstained. It's a step forward because a number of Arab nations said they would withhold contributing troops in Gaza until the UN acted. So, Carl, a step forward, and we were talking about Mike Waltz earlier. He's our UN ambassador. Good on him, right?
Well, it turns out this is a better job for him. And I don't think that's why they gave it to him. I think they gave it to him so they wouldn't have to say that they fired, the national security advisor, and they gave him, they gave him this lateral move. But yeah, that's right. This is a positive development. And I don't know what would have happened if China or Russia had, if they, they didn't want to be a pariah in the Middle East themselves, but they don't want to do anything we want them to do, so they abstain. This is the beginning of a reconstruction effort, maybe. And nobody knows how that's going to look. President Trump's his instinct was to, let's just get the Gazans out of there, like they were renters that were behind in their lease. He didn't say where they should go or how it should, how this should be effectuated, but there's going to be a lot. The mind just reeled. Like, is he saying there's going to be too much dust during the reconstruction? These people just shouldn't be in the way, or are they going to all go to Europe? Should Egypt take them? Well, if you rebuild Gaza, Gazans get to stay and presumably be part of a better future. But this plan, all these plans, Andy, continue to hinge on disarming Hamas. That's the tricky part. We haven't seen that yet. And I don't know Saudi Arabia's involvement in this or the United Nations involvement in this gets you to that point. But if you have we've had UN peacekeepers in the Middle East before, and they haven't helped. They were attacked, actually. So, this is a small step forward, but we shouldn't be doing a victory dance yet.
Yeah, I mean, granted, it's a small step forward, but it's still significant to the extent you think that the UN matters at all.
I don't really, but
well, okay. But
Tom, do you?
Not really. It has a history of not mattering a ton, and also being sort of anti-Israel and just a walking sort of contradiction and hypocrisy on human rights and all that stuff.
We had all these UN workers on Hamas, all these Hamas people on the UN payroll.
I mean, it's crazy. But listen, Mike Waltz, okay, this wasn't even his biggest victory. His biggest victory, which he announced yesterday, is that he has tapped Nicki Minaj, the mega rap star, to give a speech at the UN on the issue of Christians being persecuted in Nigeria. And she responded that she was, it was a huge honor and she was going to take it very seriously. She's going to do a great job representing the American people. And that's, Mike Waltz, he had a double victory yesterday.
Although Tom, his greatest victory may have been not being criminally charged with abusing classified information when he added Jeffrey Goldberg to a chat.
Now, Carl.
That's, all right. Okay.
Speaking of water under the bridge.
Okay.
Well, but I think Mike Waltz is an interesting fellow, and I think that's an interesting position. And I go back to people like Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Jean Kirkpatrick, who represented us there, and
Eleanor Roosevelt,
Nikki Haley.
Well, people who use the UN for what it's good for, which is it is a symbolic place to sort of make America's argument abroad. And since we're not funding the Voice of America anymore, we need a few places where we can actually talk to the rest of the world. And the UN is one of those places. And I commend him for his job so far. A little dig in there for Voice of America, Tom.
I think Andy's right. He's convinced me. We can't abandon the UN at this time.
Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm talking with Tom and Carl, and we'll be back after a few messages.
Don't go anywhere.
Good
segment coming up on my hometown of Chicago.
Hometown.
Yeah. So we'll get into it.
We'll get to it. But first, listen, we're all looking for ways to make more money. So let's be honest, the idea of learning something new, taking on more risk, or working harder, nobody wants that these days. And that's where True Trade comes in. Their AI-driven technology enables you to generate income passively without risking your own capital, wasting your time, or needing years of experience. TrueTrade has created institutional-grade software, the same type hedge funds and big banks use, but now it's available to everyday people like you and me. And here's the best part. They'll even guarantee you're trading capital. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars you can trade with. And I don't know about you, but that kind of funding could be life-changing. So if you're looking for a smarter way to make money, download their mobile app on Android or iOS, or go to TrueTrade.io right now. That's TrueTrade.io. Funded accounts are limited, so don't wait. Reserve your funding today and let technology earn for you. See terms to learn more. We're joined now by Austin Berg. He is the executive director of the Chicago Policy Center. So, Austin, welcome back to the program.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So, Austin, Cook County is ground zero right now for what may be a brewing property tax revolt. We've seen this kind of thing before back in the 70s in California and Massachusetts, where property tax hikes led to a real movement among voters. So what is going on in the Chicago area, and does this have the possibility of becoming a real movement there as well?
We just saw a report yesterday from the Cook County Treasurer's Office, and it showed that Chicago residences, so this is just residential property taxes, saw their largest property tax increase in 30 years. The median bill went up 16% in just 1 year. And people automatically think, well, okay, local government's hiking property taxes, but that's actually not the whole story. While Chicago Public Schools, for example, is raising property taxes. The real big gut punch came from the fact that in the Loop, in the downtown core, commercial property values are going down. They went down 7%. So who makes up that cost? It's homeowners. And the treasurer said it really well. It's when the Loop gets a cold, the rest of the city gets pneumonia. So that's why it's so important to protect our downtown core, to not pile on new taxes on businesses, because then everybody else's property taxes go up.
Austin, I saw an interview with Maria Pappas. She's the Cook County treasurer, and she said, well, first of all, the overall price is increases 16%, but in some of the probably poorest, most minority areas like Garfield and what were the other ones? Englewood. I mean, their property taxes are going up 80, 90, 100%. And so, and she was saying basically like, look, you don't have to pay on December 15th. On December 16th, you can sign up for a payment plan and, pay 13 months, installments over 13 months. And oh, by the way, we've decreased the interest rate from 18% to 9%. And I'm thinking to myself like, well, that doesn't really sound like an answer to me. That sounds like you're just, people are still going to have to pay this. They're outraged by it. And just because it puts it on a payment plan, and oh, by the way, we get charged our property taxes every 6 months. And so what are we going to do in 6 months when they get another bill that's 100% more? And then 6 months after that, they're going to be still paying for this year's property taxes when they have to sign up for another. I mean, it's crazy to me the way that they're handling this.
The great cruelty of this budget season, and we're right in the middle of budget season in Chicago, and budget season in Chicago is like what Drew Carey used to say on Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is the rules are made up and the points don't matter. So it's chaos right now in budget season. But Brandon Johnson, the mayor, his entire goal, his entire narrative has been, we have to tax the big corporations downtown in order to invest in Chicago's Black and minority communities, right? The problem is, Chicago's Black neighborhoods are seeing the highest property tax increases they've ever seen as a result of this. So you said West Garfield Park, it's up, it's basically double. Lawndale, basically double. Englewood, basically double. It's not, and it's double because of the stance that the mayor has taken against economic growth and against businesses. Because when you don't have those businesses coming to the downtown core, the rest of us have to make that up on our property tax bills.
And he's proposing a head tax, this crazy head tax. And he just said yesterday at a press conference that there's no correlation between taxing corporations and their success or something. I mean, it was like, I could not believe I heard those words come out of his mouth. I know he's faced some resistance on this head tax. Is it going to pass, or is he going to get denied?
Well, first tell us what the head tax is.
Sure.
Well, the head tax, I mean, it's kind of, it's hard to describe how ill-advised it is, but in very basic terms, and it is a basic tax, it's a fee you pay for every job you create. So what Brandon Johnson is proposing is that for every employee you have, over 100 employees, you're charged $21 a month for the employee. So you think about there's huge discriminatory effects on this. You think about a 100-head law firm making $50 million a year. They're cutting the same check to the city as a restaurant group with 100 part-time people that's making $5 million a year, right? So he talks about this as a progressive tax. It's extraordinarily regressive. It also doesn't apply to remote work. So what do you think the 100-head law firm's going to do? All right, 2 guys, you're working remote from the suburbs, right? And you don't have to pay anything. Meanwhile, the mom and pop restaurant group, everybody has to come in, manufacturing, everybody has to come in. And again, we need the downtown. We have record high vacancies in downtown. So this is just like red flags to businesses. Do not invest in the downtown core if this passes. Now, I will say, since we've been writing about this, we've been giving our community opportunities to take action on this. Hundreds of people have reached out to their city council members. And yesterday, we saw for one of the only times in Chicago history, I can't emphasize enough how unique it is for the council to vote against the mayor in Chicago. We have a rubber stamp council by design. The council voted against the head tax, 25-10. In a finance committee hearing yesterday. That was very surprising, very embarrassing for the mayor, very embarrassing for his biggest backer and the biggest backer of the head tax, which is the Chicago Teachers Union.
Austin, the question also raises, what is this money going for? How much is it being wasted? Now, I don't live in Chicago, but I saw, it might have been your group that unearthed it. I don't remember. Maybe it was Corey. But it's this teachers spending this money on these junkets, like getting first class hotel rooms in Las Vegas. They wasted $7 or $8 million. Are those stories true? And how much of that kind of waste is endemic in Chicago?
We just saw the Chicago Public Schools Inspector General did that report, and it showed that there was $20 million in unauthorized spending over the last several years for travel out of Chicago Public Schools. It wasn't just teaching staff, it was principals, it was central office staff taking these basically lavish trips and calling them conferences.
And they
when
were
in
going
fact they
to
were,
like crazy places all over the world.
Why
Yeah.
do they need to go anywhere?
Well, I'm all for professional development, but the problem is where are the results from that? And we can't afford it. So Chicago Public Schools is the largest junk bond issuer in the country. And they're spending $20 million on unauthorized travel, which is just insane. Now, it's horrible. It's an insult to taxpayers. It's an insult to students and teachers, frankly, who need this money to provide services to students. But ultimately, it's a drop in the bucket in terms of where Chicago's budget actually goes. Chicago's budget and its government is increasingly less a service provision arm. It's more of a capital reallocation mechanism from the young to the old, and that's in the form of debt and pensions. And we see in Chicago 30 to 40% of our budget every year, and this is a $16 billion budget this year, so you're talking billions of dollars a year, goes to debt and pensions. And that's by far the highest share of any other big city in the country. That's where the money is actually going, and it's a moral catastrophe.
Yeah. You're listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. I'm Andrew Walworth. I'm here with Tom and Carl, and we're talking to Austin Berg. He is the executive director of the Chicago Policy Center. And we're kind of picking on Chicago in this segment, Austin, because you're here. But Carl, you should weigh on this as well. I mean, we have seen, as I said in the intro, tax revolts before over property taxes. And I'm just wondering about the broader implications of this for Cook County and maybe Illinois as a whole. I mean, is there a possibility that this is the thing that sort of organizes homeowners and voters to say enough is enough and take some sort of action?
Well, it certainly happened in California. I covered it was called Prop 13, and it froze property taxes. And the interviews in the run up to it, the assessments came out, I think it was 1978. The assessments came out in October, and it was like what Austin is just describing has happened in Chicago. And people were just up in arms. And I remember interviewing when I knew that thing was going to pass, and it passed overwhelmingly. Ronald Reagan, who was sort of the former governor, he was the Republican presidential nominee in waiting, and he was early behind this. But I interviewed a woman, and she was a school teacher, and this teachers they were going to cut money to counties, the state was, and they were going to let the teachers go, and they were going to do it on a seniority basis. And she said to me, if this thing passes, I may lose my job, but if it doesn't pass, I could lose my house. I have no way to pay this tax assessment. And I thought, that's the choice they're giving school teachers between their job and their home. I thought this thing's going to pass, and it passed overwhelmingly. Austin, is there a mechanism for something like that to happen in Chicago? I mean, in Illinois, because California had a referendum process, but not every state does. But tax revolt, the phrase Andy uses, is exactly what this was. And it helped usher in an era of conservative governance in this country.
Our referendum mechanism are very, very limited in Chicago and Illinois. We talk a lot about voter suppression in other states, but our state does voter suppression better than anybody else. We're the only city in the country that holds its elections in February of off years. And I believe most of you have been to Chicago in February. It's not a time where you're eager to leave the house and go vote, especially when you're not voting on meaningful things like issues like Prop 13, right? So I do think there's an enormous sea change in Chicago, specifically around the mayor, who is has the lowest approval rating of any mayor in the history of Chicago, and the Chicago Teachers Union, which is really the political machine, and that has the lowest approval rating it's ever had. I think the really important thing for Chicago is the power to reorganize its debt. We are the only big city in the country that cannot enter Chapter 9 bankruptcy protection. And I'm not saying we need to enter it tomorrow, but having the mechanism on the table, and that requires a change in state law, is so important because it forces the tough decisions that you're talking about, right? Otherwise, why would a government union come to the bargaining table if they don't think, oh man, this could go belly up if we don't get serious about reform?
Austin, referencing Maria Pappas, this interview I saw, one of the things that she said, when people were, the anchor was asking her, she said, people, one thing they can do is people can go vote. 80% of people didn't vote in the last election. It was almost like she was saying, look, if you don't like what's going on, you voted for this guy, go vote for somebody else. And I wonder about Brandon Johnson's political fortune. So he suffers this big defeat, but my sense is he has effectively used what has gone on in the city of Chicago with ICE and CPB to sort of rally his troops behind him, even though I think his approval rating is still probably, I haven't seen any recent polling on it, but it can't be good. But so what do you make of his current standing and what his prospects might be moving forward for re-election?
He absolutely got a bump in popularity following and during Operation Midway Blitz. But I would see this as very similar to Lori Lightfoot, some may remember, was a very popular, prominent figure during the COVID response in the city of Chicago. Ultimately, she didn't even make the runoff. She was in third place. And really the core of Brandon Johnson's path to re-election is through Black Chicago. It's through Black neighborhoods. Where he got a lot of support in the mayoral election. Those same neighborhoods are seeing the highest property tax increases they've ever seen. That's a political 5-alarm fire for him. So I don't think his chances are good. But I will say we need to be able to vote on things that matter. People's decision not to vote, one, it is definitely the result of the weather, but it's also the result of the fact that one of our citywide offices is the treasurer, who made headlines just a week ago for saying she was divesting from U.S. treasuries, which is just a crazy thing. No other big city does that. And looking at that office, it's purely custodial. It has no real authority. It's not auditing departments like many other elected big city controllers are doing. It's not engaging in the budget like many other big city controllers are doing. It's a wasted political elected office. And that's who we get to vote for as one of our 3 citywide officials. So we need to encourage democracy by giving people meaningful things to do with that democracy.
Speaking of democracy, what do you think of what Chuy Garcia is about to get reprimanded in the House for what he did? I thought, we talked about this on the program. Even by Chicago standards, this like made my jaw drop.
It's one of the first projects that I worked on when I moved back to Chicago was a documentary we did on House Speaker Michael Madigan, who was House Speaker of Illinois for 32 of 34 years, longest serving House Speaker in the history of America, of any state. And Madigan perfected the machine, and this was a Madigan play like no other. It was exactly what Mike Madigan would do, and Chuy Garcia learned a lot from Mike Madigan. He really came at Madigan from the left in a new upstart progressive coalition, and eventually they made a truce and worked together, and he learned the machine ways from Madigan. That was absolutely a machine move, and it's funny to watch people from across the country be up in arms about this when that is the status quo here.
Yep. So we should just say what Chuy Garcia did was he held off retiring until the very last moment, and at the last moment announced his retirement and there was no time for anyone else to run.
And file the papers, right?
Yeah, and his chief of staff stepped in and ran and filed the papers, I guess, minutes afterwards. And so she basically is the Democratic nominee, and in that district, she basically is the next representative. I mean, the House is a little upset about this. We'll see what happens with it. And I don't know really what the House can do. But as Tom points out, boy, I mean, even for Chicago machine politics, it was pretty good.
That gets to the point about voter apathy, by the way. So if you think of Chicago's mayor is the only mayor in the country that appoints vacancies in the city council. So this happens all the time in Chicago. This is like an age-old tradition where a city council member will negotiate with the mayor, say, I'll give you votes on this, but I'm going to retire and you are going to name my kid as the replacement. Yeah. We just saw this not that far from Chuy's district. This was on the west side. Alderman Walter Burnett, a dean of the council, steps down and Brandon Johnson appoints his son to be the city council member.
The Chicago way.
Yeah.
Austin, can I ask you, is there a lesson in what's going on with Brandon Johnson for Zohran Mamdani, the first, the new incoming mayor of New York? Because, he talks this sort of this anti-capitalism patter himself, and we're going to tax corporations, we're going to tax rich people, we're going to tax them more. Is there a lesson here that Mamdani could see that if you do that, you may end up hurting the very people you claim you want to help?
I think there's also a lesson there of mistaking what your mandate actually is. I mean, his mandate's to lower cost of living for New York City residents. And if you don't do that, your coalition is not going to stick with you if that's the main issue they came in on. Brandon Johnson acted like he had an overwhelming mandate. He had the smallest margin of victory in the history of Chicago mayoral elections. He won by about 30,000 votes. And then he started acting like a Chicago teachers union activist. And then it's no wonder, he's got a 14% approval rating. He was not actually broadening his coalition in any meaningful sense. So that's a political lesson for Mamdani. I think, though, the lesson that the nation is going to see, I hope, is that New York City experienced near bankruptcy in the 70s. There's a great documentary that just came out about this called Drop Dead City that I encourage people to watch. And because of that brush with bankruptcy, New York City has really great checks and balances in its constitution, in its city charter, that prevents budgeting gimmicks and borrowing today, borrowing for 30 years to pay for costs today. That is instantiated.
Awesome. Yeah.
We don't have that.
All right, we're going to have to leave it there. That's our program for today. We've been talking to Austin Berg. You've been listening to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM. We're going to wrap it up, but we will be back here tomorrow. We hope to see you then. Thanks for listening.